Most people are exhausted not because life is hard, but because their minds are undisciplined. They wake up already tense. They react to messages, opinions, problems, and emotions they never chose. They feel busy, pressured, and overwhelmed, yet somehow never in control. This audiobook exists to end that pattern. Stoic Mastery is not about feeling calm. It is about becoming unshakable. By the end of this audiobook, you will know how to shut down overthinking on command, how to stay steady when others panic, and how to make decisions without fear, hesitation, or emotional noise. This is not a theory. This is a mental operating system used by emperors, generals, and leaders who faced chaos daily and still acted with clarity. If you listen casually, nothing will change. If you listen attentively, this will rewire how you experience pressure, conflict, and uncertainty. Before we begin, do one thing now. Subscribe to this channel. On this channel, we do not chase motivation. We build mental discipline, emotional control, and personal authority. If you want long-form audiobooks that train your mind rather than entertain it, you belong here. And listen closely. The final section of this audiobook ties everything together into a single daily rule that Stoics use to live calmly even under extreme pressure. Miss that and you miss the core of Stoic Mastery. Now sit still. Remove distractions, and let the training begin. Chapter 1. Stop arguing with reality. Reality does not care what you want. It does not negotiate. It does not explain itself. It does not apologize. That is the first truth you must accept. Most suffering is not caused by what happens. It is caused by your argument about what happens. You wake up late. Your plans fall apart. Someone disappoints you. Money moves more slowly than you expected. People behave irrationally. Life does not follow your script. And immediately, your mind starts fighting. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This ruins everything. This is not how it was supposed to go. That internal resistance is the real problem. That's the key. The Stoics understood something most people never learn. Events are neutral. They have no meaning on their own. Your judgment gives them meaning. Your resistance turns discomfort into suffering. You have a choice. You can argue with reality, or you can work with it. And one of those choices will exhaust you for your entire life. Let's be clear. Reality always wins. You can complain, you can resist, you can deny, you can replay the event in your head 1,000 times. Reality will not change. The Stoics were ruthless about this. If they did not waste energy wishing things were different. They asked one question only. What is happening and what is required of me now? That's the discipline. Most people waste their lives emotionally negotiating with the past. They relive moments that are already over. They argue with facts that cannot be undone. They bleed energy into resentment, blame, and frustration. And then they wonder why they feel tired all the time. It's not life that drains you, it's resistance. You don't suffer because something happened. You suffer because you refuse to accept that it happened. That's the key. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is strength under control. Acceptance does not mean you like the situation. It means you stop wasting energy fighting reality and start directing energy toward action. The Stoics made a brutal distinction. This is what happens, and there is what you do next. Nothing else matters. When you say, "This shouldn't be happening," you freeze yourself. You lock your mind into opposition. You delay action. You create emotional noise. When you say, "This is happening, now what?" you move forward. That single sentence changes everything. This is happening, now what? Say it again. This is happening, now what? That question returns your power. You don't need their permission to accept reality. You don't need life's approval. You don't need fairness. You need clarity. And clarity only comes after acceptance. Let's talk about control. The Stoics divided life into two categories: what is within your control and what is not. Your thoughts, your judgments, your actions, your effort, that's your domain. Other people's behavior, the past, the outcome, the weather, the market, luck, timing, not your domain. Every time you argue with something outside your control, you lose twice. First, you fail to change it. Second, you weaken your discipline. You train your mind to complain rather than act. That's the habit most people live with. They wake up and react. They let circumstances dictate their mood. They hand over control to traffic, emails, opinions, and random events. And then they say, life is stressful. It's not life. It's a lack of discipline. It's not about comfort. It's about control. The Stoics did not wait to feel calm before acting. They acted correctly regardless of how they felt. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can be emotionally reactive, or you can be mentally disciplined. When something goes wrong, you can ask, why me? Or you can ask, what now? One weakens you, the other trains you. That's the key. Here is where people get confused. They think acceptance means passivity. They think accepting reality means doing nothing. That's false. Acceptance is the starting line, not the finish line. You accept the facts so you can respond intelligently. You accept reality so you can act without emotional distortion. A Stoic does not panic. A Stoic does not complain. A Stoic observes, accepts, and moves. You missed the opportunity. Accepted. What's the next move? You lost money. Accepted. What do you control now? Someone disrespected you. Accepted. How do you respond with strength? You don't need their permission to move on. You don't need an apology from reality. You need discipline. That's the training. Now let's make this practical. From this moment on, you will catch one phrase and eliminate it. This shouldn't be happening. Every time it appears, you replace it immediately. This is happening. Now what? No emotion, no drama, no delay. This is not positive thinking. This is reality-based thinking. The world does not owe you comfort. It owes you nothing. The Stoics accepted this fully, and because of that, they were free. Free from resentment, free from emotional chaos, free from unnecessary suffering. You can be too, but only if you stop arguing. Most people argue with reality because it protects their ego. Blame feels easier than responsibility. Complaining feels easier than adapting. But the cost is enormous. You trade power for comfort, you trade action for excuses, you trade clarity for emotional noise. That's not a strength. That's avoidance. You have a choice. You can say, this isn't fair. Or you can say, this is the situation. One keeps you stuck. The other moves you forward. The Stoics trained themselves daily to accept small inconveniences without complaint. Cold, hunger, delays, discomfort. Why? Because discipline is built in the small moments. If you cannot accept a minor inconvenience, you will collapse under real pressure. That's the key. Start small. When something annoys you today, do not react. Do not complain internally. Observe it. Say silently, this is happening. Then ask, what is the correct response? Correct, not emotional. Strong, not reactive. This is how you reclaim control. You don't need perfect conditions to be disciplined. You need discipline to handle imperfect conditions. Life will never match your expectations. The sooner you accept that, the calmer you become. And calm is not passive. Calm is controlled power. This chapter is the foundation. If you cannot accept reality, nothing else works. No mindset, no strategy, no philosophy. You will always be fighting shadows. Once you stop arguing with reality, your energy returns. Your mind clears, your actions sharpen. That's the key. You mastered the first discipline, acceptance without resistance. Now we go deeper, because even when you accept reality, your own mind can still sabotage you. You stopped arguing with the world. Now it's time to stop believing every thought you have. Chapter 2. You are not your thoughts. Your mind talks constantly. Most of what it says is useless. Some of it is dangerous, and almost none of it deserves blind obedience. That is the second discipline. Most people live as if every thought is true. They hear a sentence in their head and immediately believe it. They feel an impulse and act on it. They confuse mental noise with wisdom. That is why they are exhausted. A Stoic learns this early. A thought is an event, not a command, not a fact, not an order, just an event. That's the key. The moment you believe every thought, you surrender control. You let fear drive decisions. You let doubt dictate behavior. You let anger choose your words. You don't need their permission to disobey your own mind. You don't need to agree with every thought just because it appears. You have a choice. You can observe the thought, or you can become the thought. Most people become it. I'm not good enough. I'm falling behind. This will never work. They don't respect me. I should react. They don't question it. They don't test it. They obey it. And then they wonder why their life feels chaotic. The Stoics refuse this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind has the power to withdraw assent. That means you decide whether a thought gets approval. A thought knocks. You choose whether to open the door. That's discipline. Your mind will produce fear. That's natural. Your mind will produce doubt. That's normal. Your mind will produce worst-case scenarios. That's instinct. But none of that means you must act. It's not about eliminating thoughts. It's about refusing to serve them. That's the key. Here is where people make a critical mistake. They try to think positively. They try to fight thoughts with other thoughts. That fails. Stoicism does not replace negative thoughts with positive ones. It replaces belief with observation. You don't argue with the thought. You don't suppress it. You don't panic about it. You label it. That is fear. That is doubt. That is imagination. And you move on. You don't need their permission to remain calm. You don't need certainty to act correctly. Most suffering arises from people confusing thoughts about reality with reality itself. Your mind says this meeting will go badly. Reality has not happened yet. Your mind says they are judging me. Reality is silent. Your mind says, I will fail. Reality has not confirmed anything. You are reacting to fiction. That's the key. The Stoics trained themselves to distinguish between impressions and judgments. An impression is automatic. A judgment is optional. The impression says this is dangerous. The judgment says, I agree. You can refuse agreement. This is where freedom lives. You have a choice. When anxiety shows up, you can say, this feeling is information, not instruction. When anger rises, you can say, this is an impulse, not a command. When doubt appears, you can say, this is noise, not truth. Short, clear, repeatable. That repetition rewires you. Most people let thoughts run unchecked because it feels familiar. Chaos feels normal to them. Silence feels uncomfortable. Distance feels strange. But discipline always feels uncomfortable at first. That's how you know it's working. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need approval to think clearly. Now let's talk about identity. People say, I am anxious. I am angry. I am stressed. That language is destructive. You are not anxious. You are experiencing anxiety. You are not angry. You are experiencing anger. You are not stressed. You are experiencing stress. Words matter. When you say I am, you fuse identity with emotion. You make temporary states permanent. A Stoic never does this. Emotions are the weather. You are the sky. The weather passes. The sky remains. That's the key. Once you stop identifying with your thoughts, you regain authority. You stop reacting immediately. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop spiraling. Instead, you observe. Observation creates space. Space creates choice. Choice creates discipline. This is not passive. This is a strength under control. Now here is the practice. From today on, you will insert a pause between thought and action. Even 1 second is enough. A thought says, respond now. You pause. A thought says, defend yourself. You pause. A thought says, panic. You pause. That pause is your power. Most people never pause. They live in reaction. You will not. It's not about perfection. It's about awareness. Every time you notice a thought without obeying it, you win. You are training. This chapter is not about becoming emotionless. Stoics feel everything, but they do not let feelings drive behavior. That's the difference. A disciplined mind does not need to feel calm to act correctly. It acts correctly regardless. You don't need motivation. You need control. And control begins with recognizing that thoughts are not you. Say it clearly. I am not my thoughts. Say it again. I am not my thoughts. That sentence alone dismantles most suffering. Now here is the hard truth. Your thoughts will not stop, ever. The goal is not silence. The goal is authority. You don't need to control what appears. You need to control what stays. That's the key. This chapter builds on the first. You stopped arguing with reality. Now you stop believing every mental reaction to reality. You are reclaiming territory, first from the world, now from your own mind. And once you stop being controlled by thoughts, something else becomes obvious. Even when you think clearly, you still waste energy on things you were never meant to control. That is the next discipline. You mastered acceptance. You gained distance from your thoughts. Now let's sharpen your focus. Chapter 3. Control the only thing that matters. Most people are exhausted because they are trying to control everything except the one thing they actually can. That is the mistake. They try to control outcomes. They try to control other people. They try to control timing, luck, fairness, and recognition, and they fail. Repeatedly, the Stoics made this brutally simple. There is what is within your control, and there is what is not. Confuse the two, and your life becomes chaos. That's the key. Your opinions, your judgments, your actions, your effort, your discipline, that is your domain. Other people's behavior, results, reputation, praise, criticism, the past, the future, not your domain. Every ounce of stress you feel comes from investing energy where you have no authority. You have a choice. You can keep demanding control over what will never obey you, or you can master the only territory that always responds to discipline, yourself. Most people do the opposite. They neglect their own behavior and obsess over outcomes. They ignore their habits and worry about results. They abandon discipline and chase reassurance. And then they say life feels out of control. It's not life, it's a misplaced effort. That's the key. A Stoic wakes up with one question. What is mine to manage today? Not what might happen, Not what others might think, not what the outcome should be. What is mine to manage? Your response, your preparation, your execution. Your restraint, that is enough. Everything else is noise. Now let's talk about the illusion that traps most people. They believe that if they worry enough, control will appear. If they overthink enough, certainty will emerge. If they emotionally rehearse every scenario, they will be safe. That is false. Worry is not preparation. Anxiety is not a strategy. Overthinking is not intelligence. It's avoidance. It's the mind pretending to work while avoiding discipline. That's the key. The Stoics did not waste time predicting outcomes. They prepared their character. They understood something modern thinking ignores. You do not need to control the outcome if you control your response. A strong response beats a perfect plan. You don't need their permission to act correctly. You don't need guarantees to behave with discipline. You prepare yourself, you show up, you execute, and then you accept whatever follows. That is a strength. Most people reverse this. They wait to feel confident before acting. They wait for clarity before moving. They wait for reassurance before committing. They never move. A Stoic acts first. Confidence follows behavior, not the other way around. That's the key. Here is the mental shift you must install. Outcomes are feedback, actions are a responsibility. You are not entitled to success. You are responsible for the effort. You are not entitled to approval. You are responsible for integrity. You are not entitled to comfort. You are responsible for discipline. This mindset removes emotional fragility. When something fails, you don't collapse. You adjust. When something succeeds, you don't inflate. You continue. Because your identity is no longer tied to results. It is tied to conduct. That's the key. Let's make this practical. From now on, when you feel stress, ask one question. What am I trying to control that is not mine? Be honest. Is it someone else's opinion? Is it the future? Is it recognition? Is it timing? The moment you identify it, you release it. Not emotionally, strategically. You say, this is not my domain. And then you redirect focus. What action is mine right now? Small, concrete, immediate. That question returns your power. Most people feel overwhelmed because they are thinking in global terms. They try to solve life all at once. A Stoic never does this. A Stoic solves the moment in front of them. That's the discipline. You don't control whether today is difficult. You control whether you meet it correctly. You don't control whether people respect you. You control whether you act respectably. You don't control whether things go your way. You control whether you stay composed when they don't. That's the key. Now understand this. Letting go of control does not mean giving up. It means reallocating energy. Energy wasted on outcomes becomes energy invested in execution. That is leverage. This is why Stoics appear calm under pressure. They are not calm because things are easy. They are calm because their focus is correct. They don't fight reality, that they don't fight thoughts. And now they don't fight what they cannot control. They act where action matters. You have a choice. You can live emotionally reactive, pulled in every direction by circumstances, or you can live deliberately, anchored to your own conduct. One feels busy, the other feels powerful. That's the key. Here is the daily practice. Every morning, identify 3 things you will control today. Your effort level, your tone, your follow-through, nothing else. When something unexpected happens, you repeat the rule. Is this mine to control? If yes, act. If not, release. No commentary, no resentment, no delay. This repetition builds discipline, and discipline builds freedom. Most people chase freedom by trying to control the world. Stoics gain freedom by controlling themselves. That is why Stoicism survives chaos. It does not depend on circumstances, and it depends on the character. You don't need their permission to be disciplined. You don't need ideal conditions to act correctly. You only need clarity. And clarity comes from this division. What is mine? What is not? Everything else is a distraction. This chapter completes the foundation. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped identifying with every thought. Now you stop wasting energy on false control. You are narrowing your focus. And when focus sharpens, something uncomfortable appears. You realize how much of your behavior has been shaped by other people's opinions. Approval, validation, recognition, that is the next trap. You mastered control, now you must break the addiction. Chapter 4. Detach from approval and applause. Most people are not controlled by fear. They are controlled by approval. They don't act based on what is right. They act based on what will be accepted. They don't speak when they should. They speak when it is safe. They don't choose discipline, they choose applause. That is the invisible leash. That's the key. From childhood, you were trained for this. Good behavior was rewarded, obedience was praised, agreement was encouraged. You learned early that approval feels like safety. And slowly, without noticing, you began outsourcing your self-worth. You stopped asking, "Is this correct?" You started asking, "Will they like this?" That question is poison. The Stoics warned against this directly. They understood that the moment you need approval, you lose freedom, because anyone whose opinion you need can control you. You have a choice. You can live according to a principle, or you can live according to reaction. One builds character, the other builds anxiety. That's the key. Let's be clear. Approval is not evil. Applause is not dangerous. Dependence on them is. When your mood rises and falls in response to feedback, you are no longer in control. When your confidence depends on praise, it collapses under criticism. When your decisions are shaped by fear of judgment, discipline disappears. You don't need their permission to live correctly. You don't need validation to act with integrity. The Stoics were ruthless about this. They asked one question only: would I still do this if no one ever knew? That question exposes everything. If the answer is no, your action is compromised. If the answer is yes, your action is strong. That's the key. Most people are performing. Even when they think they are being authentic, they adjust their words, they soften their opinions, they dilute their standards. Not because it's right, but because it's approved. This creates inner division. You know what you should do, but you do something else. That gap between knowing and doing is where anxiety lives. Stoicism closes that gap, not by making you louder, not by making you aggressive, but by making you independent. Approval addiction is subtle. It hides behind being nice. It disguises itself as keeping the peace. It pretends to be humility, but it's not humility. Humility is knowing your role and performing it well. Approval addiction is fearing disapproval. One is a strength, the other is dependence. That's the key. Let's talk about criticism. Most people fear criticism because they confuse it with identity. Someone criticizes your work. You hear, "I am not enough." Someone disagrees with you. You hear, "I am wrong." Someone disapproves. You hear, "I am unsafe." That interpretation is optional. The Stoics separated feedback from self-worth. Criticism is information, nothing more. Sometimes useful, sometimes irrelevant, but never a verdict on your value. You have a choice. You can evaluate criticism rationally, or you can absorb it emotionally. One improves you, the other weakens you, and that's the key. A Stoic asks two questions when criticized. Is it true? If yes, adjust. If no, discard. No anger, no defense, no spiraling, just clarity. Now let's talk about praise. Praise is more dangerous than criticism. Criticism hurts once. Praise rewires behavior. If you chase praise, you begin to optimize for applause rather than excellence. You start doing what looks good, not what is good. You start choosing what is visible, not what is necessary. You start avoiding hard decisions because they might be unpopular. That is how standards decay. The Stoics understood this, and they did not trust praise. They accepted it calmly and moved on. Why? Because praise can lie. People praise what benefits them. They praise what aligns with their preferences. They praise what is comfortable. Excellence often looks uncomfortable. That's the key. Here is the discipline you must adopt. From now on, praise and criticism receive the same response. Acknowledgement, evaluation, release. No emotional attachment. You don't inflate. You don't collapse. You remain steady. This is not coldness. This is control. You don't need their permission to remain composed. Now let's make this practical. Today, observe how often your behavior is influenced by imagined judgment. Do you hesitate before speaking? Do you soften your position? Do you avoid action because someone might disagree? That hesitation is the leash. You cut it by returning to principle. Ask one question. What is the correct action regardless of reaction? Then act. That's discipline. You will feel discomfort. That's normal. Freedom always feels uncomfortable at first. Dependence feels familiar. Independence feels risky. But the Stoics chose risk over slavery. You must do the same. You have a choice. You can live to be approved, or you can live to be respected. Approval is loud and unstable. Respect is quiet and durable. That's the key. Now understand this. Detaching from approval does not mean becoming careless or cruel. It means becoming internally anchored. You still act with respect. You still consider consequences. You still listen, but you no longer obey. You choose deliberately. That is Stoic authority. When you stop needing applause, something powerful happens. You speak more clearly. You act more decisively. You stop explaining yourself. You don't argue. You don't justify. You don't perform. You simply act. And paradoxically, this is when respect appears, not because you chased it, but because you earned it. That's the key. Let's anchor this chapter with one rule. If your peace depends on other people's approval, you are not free. Read that again. If your peace depends on other people's approval, you are not free. Stoicism is about freedom. Freedom from emotional manipulation. Freedom from crowd opinion. Freedom from insecurity. And freedom always requires discipline. You don't need their permission to be independent. You don't need applause to act with strength. This chapter removes another layer. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped obeying every thought. You stopped chasing false control. Now you stop handing your self-worth to the crowd. You are becoming internally governed. But there is one more emotional trap that still controls most people. Even after approval, power loss, and emotions still hijack decisions. Anger, fear, impulse. You must train emotional discipline, not suppression, not denial. Control. You mastered independence. Now it's time to master your reactions. Chapter 5. Train emotional discipline daily. Emotions are not the problem. Lack of discipline is. Most people blame anger, fear, stress, and anxiety for their bad decisions. That is a lie. The real problem is speed. They feel something and act immediately. No pause, no filter, no control. That's the key. Stoic discipline is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming unreactive. You feel anger, you do not become angry. You feel fear. You disobey fear. You feel stress. You do not surrender control. That distinction changes everything. You have a choice. Every emotion presents two options: reaction or response. Reaction is automatic, response is trained. Most people react because they have never trained otherwise. They say, "That's just how I am." Number, that's how you were conditioned. Conditioning can be replaced. That's the key. The Stoics treated emotions like signals, not commands. Anger signals a boundary. Fear signals uncertainty. Desire signals attachment. Signals are meant to be read, not obeyed. If a warning light appears on a dashboard, you do not smash the car. You observe the signal and decide what to do. But emotionally, most people smash the car. They send the message, they raise their voice, they quit too early, they lash out, they retreat. Not because they had to, because they never learned to pause. That pause is the skill. Between stimulus and response, there is a gap. That gap is small, but it is powerful. Inside that gap lives freedom. That's the key. The Stoics trained that gap deliberately. They did not trust their first impulse. They did not act while emotionally charged. They waited until reason returned. Not days, not hours, seconds. That is discipline. Most people think discipline means forcing yourself to do things you hate. That is incomplete. Discipline is refusing to act when you are emotionally compromised. That's the real work. When you are angry, you want to speak. When you are afraid, you want to escape. When you are excited, you want to rush. The Stoic does none of these immediately. They wait. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need justification to stay silent. Silence is often the strongest response. That's the key. Let's talk about anger. Anger feels powerful. It feels justified. It feels urgent. That is why it is dangerous. Anger compresses time. It demands immediate action. The Stoics refused this demand. They asked one question: what will I regret less tomorrow? Anger never asks that question. Discipline always does. When you speak while angry, you hand control to the emotion. When you act while angry, you extend the damage. You feel relief for seconds. You pay for it for weeks. That is a bad trade. You have a choice. You can release anger through reaction, or you can dissolve it through restraint. Restraint builds authority. That's the key. Now fear. Fear pretends to be protective. It imagines worst-case scenarios. It urges avoidance. Fear says, don't risk it. Wait longer. Stay safe. But safety without growth becomes a prison. The Stoics did not eliminate fear. They trained alongside it. They acted correctly even while afraid. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience to reason instead of fear. That's the key. You don't need confidence to act, you need commitment. Confidence follows action, not the other way around. Most people wait to feel ready. They never act. A Stoic acts because it is correct. Feelings adjust later. Now stress. Stress is not caused by workload, it is caused by mental friction, wanting things to be different, wanting certainty, wanting control over outcomes. Stress disappears when resistance ends. A Stoic under pressure simplifies. What is required now? What is the next correct action? Nothing else. Stress feeds on complexity. Discipline feeds on clarity. That's the key. Now here is the rule you must install. Never act at the emotional peak. Never. When emotion is highest, wisdom is lowest. You delay. You breathe. You step back. Not forever, just long enough. Even 10 seconds can save you from weeks of consequences. That pause is your weapon. You have a choice. You can train it, or you can keep paying for impulse. Most people pay. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, you will adopt one daily practice. The emotional delay. When you feel a strong emotion, you do not act immediately. You label it. This is anger. This is fear. This is excitement. Labeling creates distance. Distance creates control. Then you ask one question. What is the disciplined response? Not what feels good, not what feels fair. What is discipline? Sometimes the disciplined response is silence. Sometimes it is action. Sometimes it is walking away, but it is never impulsive. That's the key. This practice will feel unnatural. You will feel like you are suppressing something. You are not suppressing. You are governing. There is a difference. Suppression ignores emotion. Discipline manages it. The Stoics did not deny feelings. They denied domination. That's the distinction. Now understand this. You will fail sometimes. You will react. You will slip. That does not matter. What matters is repetition. Discipline is built through thousands of small corrections. You don't need perfection, you need consistency. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen the muscle. And like all muscles, it grows under resistance. That's the key. Let's anchor this chapter with one rule. Feel fully. Act selectively. Say it again. Feel fully. Act selectively. That is emotional discipline. When you master this, people will notice something. You become calm under pressure. You stop escalating the conflict. You stop explaining yourself. You become predictable in the best way. Stable, grounded, reliable. This is why Stoics were trusted with leadership. Not because they were passive, but because they were controlled. Control earns respect. That's the key. Now see how this fits the larger path. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped believing every thought. You focused only on what you control. You detached from approval. Now you are training your reactions. You are becoming internally disciplined. But discipline alone is not enough. If you react less, you will also speak less. And when you speak less, something powerful happens. Silence becomes a weapon. That is the next lesson. You mastered emotional discipline. Now let's talk about the power most people waste. Chapter 6, the discipline of silence. Most people talk too much. They explain, they defend, they justify, they react out loud, and every unnecessary word leaks power. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is control. That's the key. The Stoics understood something modern culture ignores. Speech is an action, and like all actions, it must be disciplined. Most people speak to relieve emotion. They talk to discharge anxiety. They talk to seek approval. They talk to feel in control. A Stoic speaks to be effective. That distinction changes everything. You have a choice. You can speak to be heard, or you can speak to be precise. One creates noise, the other creates authority. That's the key. Silence feels uncomfortable to people who rely on reaction. When there is a pause, they rush to fill it. They fear being misunderstood. They fear losing status. They fear losing control. So they talk. And by talking too much, they lose exactly what they were trying to protect: power. The Stoics treated words like currency. Spend them carelessly and you go bankrupt. Spend them deliberately and they compound. You don't need their permission to remain silent. You don't need to explain yourself immediately. You don't need to respond to every provocation. Silence is not weakness. Silence is restraint. That's the key. Let's talk about arguments. Most arguments are not about truth. They are about ego. Someone challenges you, questions for you, provokes you. Your impulse is to respond instantly, to defend, to correct, to win. That impulse is the trap. The Stoics refused to argue emotionally. They asked one question before speaking: will my words improve this situation? If the answer was no, they stayed silent, not passive, strategic. Silence denies fuel to conflict. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Silence keeps your position intact. When you speak too quickly, you give away leverage. That's the key. Now let's talk about explanation. Most people over-explain because they seek approval. They want to be understood. They want to be seen as reasonable. They want to avoid disapproval. So they justify their decisions. They say, I did this because I didn't mean it like that. Let me explain. This is weakness disguised as politeness. Strong people make decisions. Weak people defend them. You don't need their permission to choose. You don't need a consensus to act correctly. The Stoics understood this deeply. They acted according to principle, not popularity. They did not ask for validation. They did not beg for understanding. They accepted that not everyone would agree. That's the cost of independence, and it is worth paying. That's the key. Now let's address silence under pressure. When tension rises, most people panic and speak up. They rush to clarify. They rush to reassure. They rush to fill space. The Stoic does the opposite. They slow down. They pause. They allow silence to settle. Silence under pressure signals control. People trust those who are not rushed by emotion. Calm speech carries weight. Measured words land harder. That's the key. Here is a hard truth. If you cannot remain silent when necessary, you are not in control of yourself. You are controlled by impulse. The Stoics trained silence deliberately. They practiced holding their tongue when insulted. They delayed their response when challenged. They observed before speaking. Not because they were timid, because they were disciplined. Silence is not avoidance, it is preparation. You have a choice. You can react immediately and feel relief, or you can remain silent and retain power. Relief is temporary, power compounds. That's the key. Now let's talk about listening. Silence is not only about not speaking, it is about paying attention. Most people listen to respond. They wait for their turn. They rehearse their reply. Stoics listen to understand. When you speak less, you observe more. You notice tone. You notice intention. You notice inconsistencies. Silence sharpens perception, and perception is leverage. That's the key. A person who listens calmly controls the interaction. They are not rushed. They are not reactive. They are not exposed. The one who speaks too much reveals strategy. The silent one gathers information. This is not manipulation. This is discipline. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, adopt this rule. Speak only when your words add value, not when they release emotion, not when they defend ego, not when they seek validation, only when they serve clarity, action, or principle. That rule alone will change how others perceive you. You will seem calmer, more deliberate, more authoritative. Not because you try to impress, because you stopped leaking energy. That's the key. Here is another rule. Never speak while emotionally charged. If you are angry, wait. If you are anxious, wait. If you are excited, wait. Emotion distorts speech. Silence restores balance. You don't need to win every exchange. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You need discipline. Now understand this. Silence will make some people uncomfortable. They will interpret it as coldness, or arrogance, or withdrawal. That is not your problem. You are not responsible for managing their discomfort. You are responsible for managing your conduct. That's the key. Stoicism is not about pleasing. It is about alignment with reason. If silence is the correct response, you choose silence. No apology, no explanation, just restrain. This is not easy. You will feel the urge to fill space, to clarify, to defend. That urge is a habit. Habits can be broken. Each time you remain silent rather than react, you train authority. And authority is quiet. That's the key. Let's anchor this chapter with one principle. Speak less than you could, more than you must. Read it again. Speak less than you could, more than you must. This keeps your words sharp and meaningful. When you finally speak, people listen. Not because you demand attention, because you earned it. This chapter adds another layer. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped obeying every thought. You focused only on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. Now you discipline your speech. Your inner world is quieter. Your outer presence is stronger. But silence alone is not enough. If you speak less and react less, you must also learn when and how to act decisively. Restraint without action becomes stagnation. The Stoics were not passive observers. They were decisive actors. That is the next discipline. You mastered silence. Now let's talk about strength in action. Chapter 7. Act with quiet confidence. Most people confuse confidence with noise. They think confidence is volume. They think confidence is dominance. They think confidence is constant motion and constant opinion. It's not. True confidence is quiet, measured, unrushed. That's the key. The Stoics did not announce themselves. They did not seek attention. They did not posture. They acted quietly, decisively, without asking for permission. You don't need their permission to act correctly. You don't need validation to move forward. Confidence is not something you display. It is something you demonstrate through action. That's the discipline. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. They wait for certainty. They wait for reassurance. They wait for the perfect moment. They wait forever. A Stoic understands this truth. Confidence is built by action, not before it. You act first. Confidence follows. That's the key. Let's be clear. Quiet confidence is not hesitation. It is not indecision. It is not passivity. It is clarity without performance. When you know what must be done, you do it. Without explaining, without exaggerating, without seeking applause. That is authority. Most people try to convince others that they are confident. The Stoic does not care. They focus on execution. Now let's talk about decisiveness. Indecision is not caution. It is fear disguised as thoughtfulness. You replay options. You overanalyze outcomes. You delay. Not because the decision is complex, but because you fear responsibility. That's the key. Decisiveness does not mean every decision is correct. It means every decision is owned. The Stoics accepted this fully. They understood that avoiding decisions does not avoid consequences. It only delays them. You have a choice. You can hesitate and let circumstances decide for you. Or you can decide and shape the outcome. One creates regret, the other creates growth. That's the key. Quiet confidence means this: you gather enough information, you choose, you act, then you adapt. No drama, no second guessing, no self-pity. You don't cling to decisions emotionally, you commit rationally. If new information appears, you adjust. That is a strength. Weak people need to be right. Strong people need to be effective. That's the difference. Now let's talk about posture. Not physical posture, mental posture. Most people approach action defensively. They act as if waiting to be corrected. They hedge their words. They apologize in advance. This might be wrong, but I'm not sure if this makes sense. Sorry if this sounds stupid. That language leaks authority. The Stoics did not speak like this. They spoke plainly, directly, without self-diminishing. They didn't inflate themselves. They didn't shrink themselves. They stated reality and acted accordingly. That's the key. Quiet confidence sounds like this. This is the plan. This is the next step. This is what I will do. No justification, no apology. If challenged, they listened. If corrected, they adjusted. But they did not beg for approval. You don't need their permission to stand behind your actions. Now let's talk about pace. Anxious people rush. Insecure people rush. They speak quickly, they act frantically, they want to outrun doubt. A Stoic slows down, not because they are unsure, but because they are composed. Slowness under pressure signals control. It tells others you are not overwhelmed. It tells yourself you are not panicking. That's the key. When you slow your movements, your mind follows. Quiet confidence is not aggressive. It is grounded. Now let's address the fear of failure. Fear does not disappear with confidence. It becomes manageable. The Stoics did not eliminate fear. They acted despite it. They understood that failure is feedback, not identity. You fail. You learn, you continue. No drama. Most people attach meaning to failure. I failed, therefore I am incompetent. I failed, therefore I should stop. This is emotional reasoning. The Stoics rejected it. They separated outcome from self-worth. You are responsible for effort and conduct, not guaranteed results. That mindset frees you to act. You don't freeze, you don't avoid, you move. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, adopt this rule. When action is required, act without commentary. No internal speeches, no external explanations, just action. If someone asks why later, you can explain calmly. But you do not narrate your courage, you demonstrate it. That's the discipline. Here is another rule. Do not announce intentions prematurely. Most people talk about what they will do. They seek motivation from reaction. Stoics move in silence. They act. The results speak. Announcing plans invites doubt, interference, and ego. Execution requires focus. You don't need their permission to move quietly. Now understand this. Quiet confidence will unsettle some people. They expect noise. They expect reassurance. They expect performance. You offer none. You remain calm. You remain steady. This will be misunderstood. That is acceptable. Stoicism does not aim to be understood. It aims to be effective. That's the key. Now let's talk about consistency. Confidence is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in repetition. Small actions, daily discipline, kept promises. You do what you said you would do, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. That builds self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. You stop doubting yourself because you have evidence. Evidence comes from action. That's the key. When you trust yourself, you don't seek reassurance. You don't explain, you don't posture, you act. Now see how this chapter fits the path. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped obeying every thought. You focused on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. You mastered silence. Now you act, not loudly, not impulsively, calmly, deliberately, consistently. This is Stoic strength. But there is still one attachment left. Even disciplined action can be corrupted by attachment to outcomes, expectations, results, fear of loss. To live free, you must remove that final hook. You must learn to act fully without clinging to results. That is the next discipline. You act with quiet confidence. Now you must release attachment. Chapter 8. Prepare for loss before it happens. Most people suffer twice, first in imagination, then in reality. The Stoics refused this. They understood a hard truth most people avoid. Everything you have can be lost. Everyone you love can leave. Every position you hold can change. Not because life is cruel, because life is temporary. That's the key. The fear of loss controls more behavior than the fear of failure. People stay silent to avoid losing approval. They avoid action to avoid losing comfort. They cling to situations long past their usefulness because they fear what comes next. They are not living freely. They are guarding illusions. The Stoics dismantled this fear deliberately. They did not wait for loss to train resilience. They prepared in advance. You have a choice. You can pretend things are permanent, or you can train yourself to handle impermanence. One creates fragility, the other creates strength. That's the key. Let's be clear. Preparing for loss is not pessimism. It is realism with discipline. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining loss calmly without panic. Why? Because the mind that has already visited loss is not shocked by it. Shock is what breaks people. Preparation is what steadies them. Most people collapse not because loss is unbearable, but because it was unimaginable. That's the key. When loss arrives unexpectedly, emotions overwhelm reason. People panic, they grasp, they react impulsively. The Stoic has already been there mentally. So when loss arrives, they say, "I knew this was possible." And because of that, they remain intact. You don't need their permission to accept impermanence. You don't need guarantees to live fully. You need clarity. Now let's talk about attachment. Attachment is not love. Attachment is dependency. Love appreciates. Attachment demands permanence. The Stoics loved deeply, but they did not cling. They understood this distinction. You enjoy what you have. You do not demand it stay forever. That mindset changes how you live. You become present instead of anxious, grateful instead of possessive, calm instead of fearful. That's the key. Most people fear loss because they build their identity on externals. Their role, their status, their relationship, their comfort. When those are threatened, they feel erased. The Stoics built identity differently, not on what they had, but on who they were. Character, conduct, discipline, those cannot be taken. That's the key. You have a choice. You can build your life on things that decay, or you can build it on principles that endure. Loss only destroys what you cling to. Now let's address a common misunderstanding. Preparing for loss does not make you detached or cold. It makes you free. When you accept that something may end, you stop fearing it. Fear ruins enjoyment. The Stoic says, "I may lose this, and if I do, I will endure." That sentence removes panic. You don't live with dread. You live with steadiness. That's the key. Let's talk about control again. You do not control whether loss comes. You control whether loss destroys you. Most people give up too much power. They say, "If I lose this, I won't survive." That belief is the real threat. The Stoics dismantled it. They reminded themselves daily, "I have survived before. I can endure again." That repetition builds resilience. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, you will practice controlled reflection. Not obsessively, not emotionally, deliberately. You will occasionally imagine losing something you value, a role, a possession, a routine, a relationship, and you will observe your reaction. Then you say, "If this were gone, I would still have my character." You don't spiral, you don't dramatize, you normalize impermanence. That practice removes shock, and shock is what breaks people. That's the key. Most people refuse this practice because it feels uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort is where discipline is trained. Avoidance creates weakness. The Stoics leaned into discomfort to take its power away. Now understand this, you do not grieve in advance. You prepare in advance. There is a difference. Grief is emotional suffering. Preparation is mental readiness. Preparation makes grief manageable when it arrives. Without preparation, grief overwhelms reason. That's the key. Let's talk about ambition. People often fear that preparing for loss will reduce drive. It does the opposite. When you are not afraid of losing, you act more boldly. Fear of loss creates hesitation. Acceptance of loss creates freedom. When you stop protecting your ego, you take better risks. You speak honestly, you act decisively, you move forward because you are no longer negotiating with fear. You don't need their permission to accept impermanence. Now let's talk about gratitude. The Stoics did not take things for granted because they knew they were temporary. They enjoyed themselves fully without clinging. When you accept that something may end, you stop postponing appreciation. You stop waiting. You stop numbing. You engage fully. Paradoxically, acceptance of loss deepens enjoyment. That's the key. Now here is the discipline you must adopt. Treat everything as borrowed. Your body, your time, your position, your relationships. Borrowed things are respected, not clung to. You take care of them. You do not demand permanence. When they are returned, you do not collapse. That mindset creates peace. You don't need certainty to be calm. You need readiness. Now, let's anchor this chapter with one rule. You can enjoy something fully without needing it forever. Say it again. You can enjoy something fully without needing it forever. That sentence dismantles fear. Loss loses its leverage. You act without desperation. You love without possession. You work without panic. This is Stoic freedom. Now connect this back to the path. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped believing every thought. You focused on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. You mastered silence. You acted with quiet confidence. Now you remove the final chain. Fear of loss. When you are no longer afraid of losing, you are no longer controlled. And when you are no longer controlled, something becomes possible. You can simplify your life. You can remove excess. You can cut distractions. You can focus only on what matters. That is the final discipline. You prepared for loss. Now let's talk about intentional simplicity. Chapter 9. Simplify or suffer. Complexity is not sophistication. It is often avoidance. Most people feel overwhelmed, not because life demands too much, but because they allow too much. Too many goals, too many commitments, too many inputs, too many opinions. The mind was not built for this volume. That's the key. The Stoics understood something brutal and liberating. Every unnecessary thing you carry becomes a source of suffering. Excess creates friction. Friction creates fatigue. Fatigue destroys discipline. You have a choice. You can simplify intentionally, or you can suffer passively. Most people choose suffering without realizing it. They say yes when they should say no. They keep obligations that no longer serve them. They consume information that adds no value. They maintain relationships that drain energy. And then they say, life is heavy. It's not life, it's excess. That's the key. The Stoics lived with ruthless clarity. They asked one question repeatedly. Is this necessary? Not, is this enjoyable? Not, is this impressive? Not, will this make me look good? Necessary. That question cuts through illusion. Most of what fills your day is not necessary. It is habitual. It is expected. It is inherited from other people's priorities. Simplicity begins when you stop living on default. You don't need their permission to choose less. You don't need approval to remove what drains you. Now let's talk about mental clutter. Information overload weakens judgment. When you consume everything, you understand nothing. When your attention is divided, your action is diluted. The Stoics guarded their attention fiercely. They did not chase the news. They did not obsess over rumors. They did not feed anxiety with constant input. They focused on what improved character and action. Everything else was noise. That's the key. Most people confuse being informed with being effective. They know what is happening everywhere, but they control nothing anywhere. Simplicity requires selectivity. You choose what enters your mind. You choose what deserves your attention. Attention is life, waste it, and your life fragments. Now let's talk about commitments. Every commitment is a contract with your future energy. If you say yes to everything, you betray yourself. The Stoics respected their limits. They did not overextend. They did not perform for others at the expense of integrity. They chose fewer obligations and honored them fully. That is a strength. Weak people try to be everywhere. Strong people choose where they matter. That's the key. Here is a hard truth. If everything is important, nothing is. Simplicity demands prioritization. You cannot give full effort to 10 directions. You must choose. Choosing feels uncomfortable because it excludes, but exclusion is not loss. It is a focus. And focus multiplies power. Now let's talk about possessions. Excess possessions do not create security. They create maintenance. More things require more attention. More attention creates more distraction. The Stoics did not reject comfort. They rejected dependency. They could live with less without anxiety. That ability made them free. You don't need to renounce everything. You need to remove what owns you. Ask yourself this: if this disappeared, would my peace disappear with it? If the answer is yes, you are attached. Attachment is vulnerability. That's the key. Now let's talk about goals. Most people chase too many goals at once. They call it ambition. It is fragmentation. They start, they stop, they switch, they scatter effort, and then they feel behind. The Stoics pursued a few goals with discipline. They valued depth over novelty. They understood that progress comes from sustained focus. One direction, repeated action. That's it. Simplicity is not laziness. It is strategic concentration. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, conduct a subtraction audit. Not addition, subtraction. Look at your life and ask, what drains energy without returning value? What creates stress without improving character? What exists only because it always has? Be honest. Then remove one thing, one commitment, one habit, one distraction. Do not remove everything at once. That creates chaos. Remove deliberately. Simplicity is built gradually. That's the key. Now understand this. Saying no will trigger guilt. People will be confused. Some will resist. That is expected. You are not responsible for managing other people's expectations. You are responsible for managing your energy. You don't need their permission to protect your focus. Now let's talk about time. Time is not managed by doing more. It is managed by choosing less. Every yes consumes time. Every no protects it. The Stoics treated time as non-renewable. They did not waste it on trivialities. They did not postpone what mattered. They acted deliberately. Simplicity clarifies time. When your life is simpler, priorities become obvious. Obvious priorities reduce anxiety. Anxiety disappears when decisions are clear. That's the key. Let's talk about inner simplicity. This is not just external. Inner simplicity means fewer emotional entanglements, less resentment, less comparison, less obsession with what others are doing. Comparison is complex. Resentment is complex. The Stoics removed these by focusing inward. What is required of me? Not what are they doing? Not what do they have? That question simplifies everything. Now, here is the rule you must adopt. If something does not improve your character, clarity, or capacity to act, it is optional. Read that again. If something does not improve your character, clarity, or capacity to act, it is optional. Optional things should never dominate your life. That's the key. Simplicity creates space. Space creates calm. Calm allows discipline. Discipline creates freedom. This is not minimalism as an aesthetic. This is minimalism as a survival strategy. A simplified life is harder to disturb, less to protect, less to manage, less to lose. That is Stoic strength. Now connect this to the path. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped believing every thought. You focused on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. You mastered silence. You acted with quiet confidence. You prepared for loss. Now you remove the excess. What remains is essential. And when only the essential remains, one final question emerges. What do you do each day? How do you live when distractions are gone, fear is reduced, and discipline is trained? The Stoics answered this clearly. Live as if this day matters. That is the final discipline. You simplified your life. Now it's time to live it deliberately. Chapter 10. Live as if this day matters. Most people live as if time is unlimited. They postpone, they delay, they tell themselves they will start later. Later becomes never. That is not an accident. That is unconscious living. The Stoics treated time differently. They lived with one brutal awareness. This day will not repeat. That's the key. Not someday, not next year, today, this hour, this conversation, this decision. When you forget this, life becomes sloppy. When you remember it, life becomes sharp. Most people waste time not because they are lazy, but because they are distracted. They drift, they react, they fill days with trivialities, and then they feel empty. The Stoics refused to drift. They asked one question every morning. How should a disciplined person live today? That question changes behavior. You have a choice. You can live on autopilot, or you can live deliberately. One numbs you, the other strengthens you. That's the key. Living as if this day matters does not mean panic. It does not mean rushing. It does not mean squeezing productivity from every second of productivity. It means intention. You choose how you show up. You choose how you act. You choose what deserves your energy. Most people let the day happen to them. A Stoic meets the day prepared. Now let's talk about death. Not dramatically, practically. The Stoics did not fear death. They used it as a lens. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. Not to depress yourself. To clarify yourself. When you remember that life ends, distractions lose power. Petty arguments fade. Ego softens. Trivial concerns shrink. What remains is essential. That's the key. Ask yourself this. If this were your last day, would this matter? Would this behavior make sense? Would this worry deserve attention? Death awareness is not morbid. It is grounding. It forces honesty. Now let's talk about urgency. Urgency does not mean speed. It means seriousness. You can move slowly and still act urgently. Urgency means you do not postpone what matters. You do not delay difficult conversations. You do not wait for perfect conditions. You act when action is required. The Stoics did not procrastinate character. They did not say, "I'll be disciplined later." They practice now. That's the key. Most people wait to feel ready. Ready never arrives. You don't need motivation to live deliberately. You need commitment. Commitment to act correctly even when it is inconvenient. Commitment to do the hard thing today instead of the easy thing now. That is Stoic living. You have a choice. You can spend today reacting, or you can spend today choosing. Reaction consumes time. Choice invests it. Now let's talk about presence. A wasted day is not one where nothing happened. It is one where you were not present. You were physically there, but mentally elsewhere, scrolling, replaying, worrying. The Stoics trained attention. When they ate, they ate. When they worked, they worked. When they spoke, they spoke. Presence multiplies the value of time. One focused hour is worth more than 10 distracted ones. That's the key. Living as if this day matters means this: when you act, act fully. When you rest, rest fully. When you speak, speak deliberately. No half-living. Most people live in fragments. Stoics lived in alignment. Now let's talk about legacy. Not a public legacy. Personal legacy. At the end of each day, the Stoics reviewed themselves. Not to shame, to train, they asked, did I act according to reason? Did I let impulse control me? Did I avoid something I should have faced? This daily review sharpened character. You don't need their permission to evaluate yourself honestly. This practice builds integrity. Integrity is internal alignment. When your actions match your principles, you sleep calmly. When they don't, anxiety appears. That's the key. Most people try to escape anxiety through distraction. Stoics eliminated anxiety through correction. They adjusted behavior, not mood. Now let's make this practical. From today forward, adopt this structure. Morning. Before the day begins, ask, what is the one thing today that requires courage or discipline? Do not list 10 things. 1. That is your anchor during the day. When distracted or tempted, ask, is this how a disciplined person uses time? That question cuts through impulse. Even if you fail, awareness trains you. Evening, before sleep, review the day, not emotionally, objectively. Where did I act well? Where did I act poorly? What will I correct tomorrow? No guilt, no praise, just training. That's the key. This daily loop transforms life. Slowly, relentlessly. Living as if this day matters also changes how you treat others. You stop postponing respect. You stop withholding honesty. You stop wasting time on resentment. You speak clearly. You act cleanly. Because time is limited. Now understand this. Urgency does not mean intensity all the time. The Stoics valued rest. They valued reflection. But rest was intentional, not escapism. You rest to recover strength, not to avoid life. That distinction matters. Now let's talk about regret. Regret does not come from failure. It comes from inaction, from not trying, from avoiding, from postponing. The Stoics designed their days to minimize regret. They could accept failure. They could not accept cowardice. You should adopt the same standard. You have a choice. You can end the day knowing you acted correctly, or you can end it distracted and numb. One builds pride, the other builds emptiness. That's the key. Now connect this to everything you have learned. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped believing every thought. You focused on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. You mastered silence. You acted with quiet confidence. You prepared for loss. You simplified your life. All of that was preparation. Preparation to live deliberately. Stoicism is not about surviving life. It is about using it well. And life is measured in days, not years, not decades. Days. How you live today is how you live your life. That's the final truth. read it again. How you live today is how you live your life. You don't need their permission to live deliberately. You don't need certainty. You don't need more time. You need discipline, and discipline is practiced now. This chapter completes the path, but the work does not end here. Now comes the final reminder, the closing that binds everything into one rule you must live by. You trained your mind. You disciplined your behavior. You reclaimed control. Now you must choose to live this way, every day, without exception. The rule that makes you unbreakable. You made it to the end because you sensed this was not entertainment. It was training. Now everything comes together. You stopped arguing with reality. You stopped obeying every thought. You focused only on what you control. You detached from approval. You trained emotional discipline. You mastered silence. You acted with quiet confidence. You prepared for loss. You simplified your life. And you learned to live as if this day matters. Here is the single rule that binds it all. Control your judgment. Direct your action. Release everything else. That is Stoic Mastery. When reality hits, you do not complain. You assess. When thoughts arise, you do not obey. You observe. When emotions surge, you do not react. You pause. When approval tempts you, you do not chase. You choose the principle. When action is required, you do not hesitate. You act calmly. When loss threatens, you do not cling. You endure. When life becomes noisy, you simplify. When time feels short, you live deliberately. This rule makes you unbreakable because nothing external can control it. Not people, not outcomes, not fear, not praise, not chaos. Only you. And here is the final challenge. For the next 30 days, live by this rule consciously. Every decision, every reaction, every day. Ask yourself repeatedly, is this within my control? Is this the disciplined response? Is this how a calm, strong, free person acts? Do not aim for perfection. Aim for consistency. Discipline compounds. If this audiobook sharpened your mind, do one thing now. Subscribe to this channel. We build mental discipline here, not motivation and not noise, training. And if you return to this audiobook again, listen differently, not for inspiration, for correction. The Stoics did not seek comfort, they sought strength. Now you know how. The work is no longer theoretical, it is daily. Choose well. If you felt calmer while listening, that is not an accident. That calm came from structure, from order, from discipline. And discipline is something you can return to. You will not remember every sentence from this audiobook. You do not need to. What matters is that you remember the standard it introduced, a standard for how you think, how you respond, how you carry yourself when life applies pressure. When chaos returns, and it will, you now know what calm feels like inside your own mind. That is something no one can take from you. If you want to deepen this training, the most natural next step is our audiobook, How to Stay Calm When Everything is Falling Apart. It builds directly on what you practiced here. Not theory, not motivation, but applied calm under real pressure. You will find it on this channel. And if this audiobook helped you think more clearly, act more deliberately, or simply slow down enough to feel in control again, subscribe now. This channel exists for one purpose: to train mental strength for people who refuse to live reactively. No hype, no noise, just discipline. Return to this audiobook whenever you feel yourself slipping back into reaction. And remember this, calm is not something you wait for. It is something you practice every day.